right. Let's get sound check.
Hello, hello, hello.
How's it going, everyone?
Okay, Francois, you seem soft, and every time you move, it's making noise on the mic.
Okay, interesting. Oh, I think I might have my mic cable over another cable, and there might be interference. I'm gonna move it.
Yeah, it's like
Okay.
a lot of interference there.
Well, I moved the cable around. Is that better?
Yes, that's significantly better. Yes.
Okay.
All right.
Sorry, there's a rat's nest of cables here.
Yeah. All right, cool.
Any rats?
Des souris, as my daughter would tell me. Des souris. All right. Welcome, everybody, to CanHammer Podcast, episode 199, the penultimate episode to our 200th episode, which we have finally decided we'll be doing on the history of CanHammer, a lighthearted episode featuring Mr. Chris Haynes, returning triumphantly to the podcast.
Rumors of his death have been
Greatly exaggerated.
Yeah, exactly.
He's still around, constantly chirping us and painting a lot of tiny little realistic miniatures.
Flames of War.
Flames of War.
I don't think he actually even plays Flames of War. He just paints the minis.
Yeah. Well, it looks kind of cool, but yes. So
Yeah.
Next podcast, we'll be going over the many varied, wide history of CanHammer, of which possibly only Chris knows. Because none of us know, because we've not been there.
It may be completely fabricated.
But it should be entertaining nonetheless. So join us next time for that. Tonight we'll be talking about, I've titled it, Traitors and Heretics. Which is which?
That's almost funny.
So, yes, we'll try not to make too many traitor jokes about Dark Angels, because quite frankly, it's a little bit old now. But it's good to get those in every once in a while. So I'm joined again by my erstwhile colleagues, Francois and Nick. How are you guys doing?
Pretty good. Been hobbying a lot the last couple of weeks.
Okay. We're going to come to hobby in a second, but the rumor is that lockdown may end next week in Ontario anyway. I know that Quebec's letting up a little bit, I think, next week.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And
so we're still going to have a curfew, I think, however, but they're gonna let us go back into stores.
You get to get your hair cut, Francois.
Yes, I know. I need it.
I wasn't going to say anything, but it's just really obvious.
Yes.
Yeah.
I haven't had a professional haircut since last March.
I haven't had a professional haircut since I was 20. But yeah, so the rumor is it might let up next week. Our COVID numbers here have been like they were before the lockdown, kind of 40 to 60 a day, which was open season for us. So hopefully it's looking good. I'm intending to get my second shot on Valentine's Day, which unfortunately a lot of my colleagues are having their second shots pushed back because for whatever reason Canada can't get its ass in gear with vaccination. We're not even on the top 15 of countries in terms of number vaccinated at this time, which is quite frankly embarrassing. But hopefully I just need my second shot and then we're good to go. I don't care about,
Well, once you're vaccinated, I'm back to your basement.
Once I'm vaccinated and we can actually leave the house, we're good to go.
Yeah.
Some good news, though. The AstraZeneca vaccine, one of the studies has shown that it seems to prevent transmission of the virus as well. So that's encouraging.
Yeah. So we'll see. There's all sorts of vaccines coming out now, and they all want to make it better than the other guy, obviously. So you got to wonder sometimes, the skeptic in me. I mean, there's a lot of money right now being thrown at drug companies for vaccines. So there's a lot of firepower, let's say, for skeptics. But we must believe in the science. So, okay, enough about COVID. Let's talk about hobbies. What have you guys been up to? Francois, you've been doing a lot of hobbying. What are you up to?
Yeah, so the big news, and I don't think I shared this on the podcast yet, is I got a 3D printer, and I've been having a lot of fun with the hobby of 3D printing, because that's really what it is, and finding neat files and printing like upgrade bits and cool looking helmets for Space Marines. and things like that. And so that's been a lot of fun. Although I subscribe to a couple Patreons for cool minis, and I can print a lot faster than I can paint. And I can paint really, really fast. So I'm going to have to cool it a bit so I don't get overwhelmed by the pile of gray resin coming off the printer.
Yeah, well, anybody can tackle that rapidly growing pile. It's you, though.
Yes, and I also plunged back into my very first 40K army back in the early 90s. My first 40K army was Dark Angels, and I sold that army off a couple of decades ago, but I started it again. And it's a project that predated the new rules. I accidentally fell into a good rule set. It was a nostalgia project, but I have a bunch of Terminators on my paint desk now, and I'm really having fun with it.
So accidentally fell into White Scars, accidentally fell into
the White Scars
and now accidentally
were meta chasing.
So how many?
I picked them because
how many types of Marines do you have now?
4. That's normal, right? To have 4 different Space Marine chapters, all painted in the proper colors.
So to clarify for people, when Francois wants to play a different chapter, he just doesn't tell you it's a different color. He actually buys a whole new chapter.
Yep. No blue White Scars or black Ultramarines here. It's all the proper paint scheme because I'm crazy.
All right, cool. How about you, Nick? You been up to much?
Well, I had when the Death Guard book dropped, I started working on Morty finally. Still working on him a bit. I've had to take a little bit of a break for personal reasons in the last week, but I'll be getting back to it pretty soon. I think the most hobby I've done is really just go to pick up my Chimera colors from you.
That was a project. That was like a 4-hour drive project.
Yeah. Well, I was already in the area anyway, so I thought I'd take advantage. So I got my Chimera colors. They're still in the box, sitting on my desk, waiting to be used. Those will probably be used for Magnus when I get around to him. And then I ordered Green Stuff World fluorescent paints. So yeah, those are going to be pretty good. I'm going to use those on the Necrons just to brighten them up a bit, have their green really pop. And yeah, that's it. So a little slow in the last week, but hopefully it'll pick up there in the next week or two.
So my hobby has been, again, resurrecting the Dark Angels. And I started this maybe a couple of weeks before they announced that the book was coming out so soon. Like, I knew the book was coming out, but I was thinking end of March or like March sometime. Then they're like, oh, book's next week. And I was like, whoa, okay. But I was resurrecting my Dark Angels, of which I have maybe over 20,000 points of Dark Angels that I played. That was what I played in
But
7th.
half of that is drop pods, right?
Half of this drop pods, the other half is rhinos. Yeah. So, like I played the Lion's Blade, like Battle Company shit in 7th, and so I had so many little Marines. I have like over 120 of those stupid little dudes. And a significant portion of my collection was Raven Wing, because I used to play Raven Wing armies, and that was even before the rerollable 2-up Jink Save Invuln shenanigans. And I loved the Raven. That was my jam. And then and I never owned a single Deathwing because Terminators have been shit for a long time, and I really don't like those how they look, and I don't like the bone. And so I never had a single Terminator, and so now to resurrect my army is really simple. I've just brought my Raven Wing out of the box because most of that stuff is still good. Nick will recognize this model. This is the Interrogator Chaplain, Special Chaplain dude with the fist, and he put it on a Raven Wing biker for me, so that's cool. I can just use him as a Primaris Chaplain because who cares?
Oh, that's so long ago.
I made myself a Primaris version of Azrael, which I'll just use for casual games because the old Azrael sucks ass. And I've been converting Blade Guard. There's with the new Dark Angels banner on it. And Francois has been printing me these awesome helmets, which turned these Blade Guard guys into really looking, they're going to be Blade Guard. And I have ordered, I just received yesterday, or today actually, these motherfuckers, the Cenobium Forge World guys, which are some of the awesomest models of all time, but they're not toys, okay? These are not toys.
Those look really good. I'm excited to see you.
So I've got maces, again, courtesy of Francois, and we're going to put shields on these guys. These guys are going to be Deathwing Knights. And I got 20 of these guys. And then I'm still waiting for those those champions, those Dark Angels champions. You know, the dudes with the shields that are not Terminators, that are also Forge World, but they're out of stock. They've been out of stock for a long time. They were gonna be my Blade Guard, but I don't know if they're ever gonna come into stock. So I've converted up these other Blade Guards. So we'll see. So that's what I'm up to, and I'm going to repaint everything. So I already had like these Inceptors painted from before, but they're really shittily painted. So I'm going to repaint everything, and I haven't decided to make them heresy color or green. The green color kind of annoying to me now. It's like annoying. Yeah, so I don't know. Haven't decided yet. All right, that's what I'm doing, which is very exciting. Because I've always looked for an excuse to play Dark Angels, but I have not had that excuse. Every time they got something, I was like, can I play it again? Can I play Ravenwing? I was like, And I was very disappointed still that probably Black Knights aren't really playable, because I have like 25 of those guys. They got better for sure. Maybe still slightly pricey.
Yeah, it's maybe just a touch, but that's in comparison to all the other cool Marine stuff you can bring into this army. I think in a vacuum, they're fine. They just maybe don't compare favorably to everything else.
Would have been really nice if they got included in the OBSEC thing. But we're going to talk about that later. Okay, so what we're going to do tonight is talk about Dark Angels and Death Guard. First, we'll talk about Death Guard. Our resident Chaos expert, Nicholas Blackburn, is going to talk about what he likes from the Death Guard book. We're going to talk about what we don't like, as in what we are fearful of in the Death Guard book. And for all of 1 week, Death Guard were the crushing meta, and then Dark Angels got announced. Everyone seems to have forgotten about Death Guard. But we're going to talk about Mortarion and the big model thing, and then we're going to talk about Dark Angels. So, Nick, what is good about the Death Guard?
Well, what is good versus what I like? I'm going to tell you what I like.
They're not the same
I
thing?
like the Death Guard. I mean, people may agree or disagree. Look, my favorite thing about the Death Guard is the book actually feels distinct. Like they have character on the battlefield that is distinct from other Chaos, other than just being painted green and slightly tougher. So these guys are really, really tough. And as the game progresses, should you play Mono Death Guard, their contagion increases. Now, I'm just going to talk I'm just going to assume people know what I'm talking about, because we're a little late to the party here. But basically what I do like is as the game progresses, they envelop the battlefield in a sickness because of that contagion increasing. So I like that a lot. I like that Mortarion is playable now. I like that he's a Primarch and he feels like a Primarch. Like when you go to deploy him, the opponent has to figure out what they're going to do about him, if they can do anything about him. I like that. And I like that the Terminators in here are the unit, because I love the Terminator models. So that's, bottom line. Oh, and one other thing that people are going to disagree with me that I like, I know we said 3, is I actually do like the army restrictions. So some people complain that, for example, you can only have so many Poxwalkers depending on the number of core Bubonic Astartes units you have. I like that because it kind of prevents somebody from, spamming 200 Poxwalkers, because I think Poxwalkers are at a good spot with their 5 points and their stats. I think they're really good, but they will become broken if somebody can put 200 or 300 of them on the battlefield. So I think it's kind of clever in how GW balances that. You can still have your 5-point Poxwalker, but you do have to include, other Bubonic Astartes, like Plague Marines, Death Shroud, or Blight Lords. So, those are the big things about the book that I really like. And overall, there's no real meta right now. But what I do like about the book, I don't know if this is going to be a GT contender. I don't know if we're thinking like S tier. But I do know that it does upset what the more popular builds were at the time of this dropping. So like your White Scars that really take advantage of the damage too. I mean, even if you build your army clever enough, even something like Blood Angels that rely on charging benefits, because you can negate that. So like I said, I'm not entirely sure if we see Death Guard winning majors, but I do know that they're going to upset people on the way to winning a major, or people are really going to have to consider them. And the more I see the books drop for ninth edition, the more I'm seeing people are going to have to consider all comers lists, or, if they do a big skew list, really hope that they don't hit their hard counter. But that's going to be,
especially with a lot of people were tacking into damage 2 for the Marines,
Yep.
and that
Yeah.
just does nothing
Venatari.
to Death Guards.
yeah. Well, yeah, especially if somebody goes, like, I'm thinking if I'm going to run a non-Mortarian build, it'll be a Terminator heavy build. So like 20 Terminators. So somebody showing up with damage 2 will be almost meaningless between having 4+ invol, -1 damage T5 Terminators.
It's the true heyday of the Terminator right now. The re-emergence of the Terminator. Probably Custodes Terminators were the best for a while. Then we had Deathwing, and then these guys, and then now Deathwing again. Like, there's a lot of good Terminators out there, and which is cool because Terminators have been so shit for so long.
They're so
also
iconic.
an iconic model. You and I think.
Wait a minute. You and your PhD.
You guys. So, like, if you read the novels, Horus Heresy novels, what is the scariest thing in the novel for Marines is when a freaking group of Terminators drops down and takes out like 20 Marines, right? And like everything's just pinging off them, right? That just was not represented in the game for so long.
Or one of the best scenes in the third book of the Horus Heresy is when Abaddon shows up finally, and it's him and Little Horus fighting Garviel Loken and I forget his buddy. And Loken's doing well, but then Abaddon shows up in Terminator armor, and it's just like game over. You know what I mean?
Terminators come down, everyone's like, oh my shit, Terminators. So that's cool.
Yeah.
I really agree with you. I really like how they wrote this book with two things in mind. First of all, none of this poxwalker spamming, boring shit that people always inevitably do if it's possible, okay? So none of that. Yeah. Which is great. They had the foresight to cut that shit off before it happens and put in these kind of restrictions. So I really like that. Again, carrying on with the disincentivizing of soup, of which Chaos was the biggest culprit, and we will see if that continues with other Chaos books, if they're trying to cut down on Chaos soup. In return, though, they got to make Chaos books better by themselves without souping. I always found it difficult to understand Chaos, and I can imagine as a new player, you're like, yeah, I want to play Chaos. It looks awesome. But then you're like, well, where do you start? You buy some of this and some of this god and some of these random models and some of this random shit, and you're like, what the hell is this, right? It would be nice if it was like, okay, Death Guard, Thousand Suns, Word Bearers, like just like it is on the Marine side. I think that's what they need to do, and make people want to play to their faction and not have to mix noise Marines with berserkers and I don't know, so hopefully something like that happens. Death Guard is a good step. Thousand Suns will be like that probably, but hopefully we see a little bit of the Marine treatment on the Chaos side so people don't have to play soup to compete.
I couldn't agree more, to be honest. As a longtime Chaos player, I've got a jillion points of Chaos, and it's just because if you compete in the past, you had to soup. There was not really any, or there were few Chaos builds that didn't involve souping. You were just hamstringing yourself. So now I think incentivizing players to just go mono decks, not only for me, looks better on the battlefield, because I like to paint. I like painting, putting a lot of effort in my models. But when you go to an event and you've got 3 different books, it's really hard to make that all tie in properly. You know what I mean? You have gold Thousand Suns and green Death Guard, and then you have, red demons. You're like, okay, well, this doesn't look cohesive. So anyways, there's a lot of reasons I like the idea of them pushing for mono book Chaos. And just for the opponent too, because it's when you go to a game and you're trying to explain to your opponent, well, this does this, and then it overlaps with this, but this doesn't overlap with that, but then these give benefits
Keywords
to this. They have to kind of, and then they have to kind of trust you, and you're like, I mean, for me, fine, but I can understand that makes it a little uneasy at times.
And
the book feels real fluffy. I don't play Chaos, so I don't have as good a grasp of the rule as Nick does. But from my outside view looking in, I'm looking at this book and going, this is how Death Guard should feel. They feel proper Death Guard, and I'm really
Be
a big
nice
fan of that.
if they moved that 1
100%.
inch extra slower again, though. That'd be nice. That would feel more like Death Guard.
I don't know.
Well, they're already pretty slow. They
yeah,
don't have a lot of fast options.
and they seem like they'll be strong. Like again, we won't know until we have a proper sample size to see what the impact on the game will be. But I think at worst, they're one of those armies that will kind of go like 4-1 or something and block you somewhere. So they, even if they don't reach the pinnacle, and they may, we don't know. Even if they don't, they'll be like what Knights were a couple of years ago. Basically, you have to prepare for them and be ready for them, otherwise you can't win a tournament.
So
right. And if that's the worst case scenario, that's still pretty good.
That's still pretty good. You still can have fun going 4-1 and upsetting somebody's day when they, didn't consider
when
you.
they tech into damage too, and
yeah, exactly.
Tickles.
Just laugh your way
yeah,
to the W.
I like the in a game where from 8th all the way into 9th, it was just getting more and more and more killy. Death Guard is pretty killy too, but now you have an army that's really focused on toughness. And I think Custodes was like that when it first came out with the new book. Maybe we're even now not as tough as we need to be, but like it's there's a few factions that are renowned for their toughness. Now, like Dark Angels are going to be freaking tough. Like all the Deathwing basically has got transhuman, and all the bikes have 4-up invulns, right? So like it's going to be a tough army. So it's interesting, this kind of trend, and who knows where that's going to go. Like maybe Admech soon, and they're just going to blow everybody away regardless of your toughness. Who knows? But
well, and Necrons too. Necrons are also a book that's fairly resilient depending on the build that you use, but it can be a very resilient army as well. So maybe GW is trying to make armies stay on the table just a little bit longer. And the way that the missions are designed in 9th, we're also playing to that 5th turn more often. There's more terrain. You play to the mission more. From the limited amount of games that we've been able to play because of COVID, it feels to me like 9th is more of a late game kind of game than 8th was, and that rewards the resilience these armies,
especially with the changes they just made to like last turn scoring and stuff.
Yeah,
and what's interesting is now we've got a number of 9th books. We're really starting to see the gap between 9th books and 8th books, whereas like
poor Imperial Guard,
like you can't even compare.
38%,
like you can't even say, okay, well, Death Guard is so much better than Guard. That is not even a fair comparison anymore. You have to wait till everybody's got their book and then kind of see which books are at the top, right? So
the 9th book so far, they've been good. Like I don't think there's a single dud in there.
So far, they've been good. Yeah. Okay.
And you can't listen to the initial hype, because I remember when Necrons came out, people were crying. It was such a bad book. And now, like, as months go by, it's like just getting better and better and better. Like more and more is coming out of it as people discover it. So
that's the rule of the internet, right? Rules are either broken good or broken bad. They can never be in the middle.
Yeah, and unless you live in Australia, nobody's really playing right now. So, okay, let's talk quickly about Mortarion. So, and maybe we don't have to talk specifically about Mortarion other than the fact that he is ridiculously hard to kill. So he's T8. He's turning off all your auras. He's 2-up, 3-up. Oh yeah, he's a scrub with only 3-up save. Yeah, what a scrub! Like who made this prime? Who made his armor? Like what the hell? So he's 3-up, 4-up, 5-up Funeral Pain, -1 damage, of course. You don't get auras around him. Like 18 wounds, fast. Like you can't really run away from him anymore in this small table kind of Warhammer. Like he's a problem for a lot of armies and super tough. And then he can make himself -1 to hit, I think, with a psychic power. And so what do you guys think? And he's like, what, 500 points? Just over 500? 490?
490, yeah.
Okay,
490,
so what do you guys think? And maybe we can draw a little bit from AOS experience, although it's a completely different game. But what do you guys think of these centerpiece models in 40K specifically?
I love it. I love the idea that if you're buying a big model, painting a big model, and putting a big model on the table, it should not die to a stiff breeze. And Mortarion feels appropriate to me. So we can argue about whether or not he's fairly costed and could he be like 30 points more, maybe. But beyond that, I'm super happy to see a Primarch hit the table and have impact on the game like that. And I wish they just did that for every army. Like, I'm going to use a personal example. I have a Baneblade on the shelf right now, right there, that I painted relatively recently, actually. Baneblades are terrible. I painted it because I wanted a Baneblade because the Baneblade looks cool. But a Baneblade right now is literally worse than two Lemon Russes taped together. So I'm hoping that they carry this design philosophy forward where if you make the investment of buying something that expensive, that big, put in the effort of painting it, you have a reason of putting it on the table. So for me, Mortarion is a big win for GW.
Yeah, I agree too. And like, let's be honest, regardless if you're just a narrative player or a painter or even a competitive player, everybody still has a bit of this narrative in their head. You're not playing Warhammer if you don't at least like the look of models or like the story or whatever else. You know, there are other games you can play if you're strictly interested in razor edged competitive play. So I don't know. I think he adds a bit of that a narrative element to it. Not every army has. He's a big bad guy. He makes Death Guard be a proper villain on the table. And look, he's strong. He's powerful. I think he's a little overstated. He's kind of like when the Nightbringer came out. Everybody thought, "Oh my God, broken. We can't play anything against the Nightbringer. He's gonna kill us all." And then turns out Nightbringer is okay. You know, like he's good, but you know, like Mortarion might be a little bit better than that, but you know, he's not as killy as he used to be. He's probably why I think if Warp Time even survives to in the next Chaos Space Marines book, it'll be choose a core unit. Um, yeah, I mean, I like it. I think, you know, if you're going to have a Primarch, if you're going to have a model for a Primarch, it should behave like a Primarch. And like Chaos, you know, those guys, you know, they got influenced by Chaos, so they individually are going to be stronger. So he feels like an unstoppable force on the table. Whereas something like Gilliman, you know, those Primarchs wouldn't have been tainted by Chaos, so their effects are going to be more felt in terms of how they influence the rest of the army. You know, yeah, more of a force multiplier. And to me, that's thematic, right? I would expect Gilliman to be the one leading, you know, his troops more tactically and strategically versus Mortarion just being like, you know what, I'll do it myself.
So I'm gonna put the counter argument, and that and we're just talking about centerpiece models where you can only take one. So I don't want to talk too much about big models that you can spam, like Knights or Baneblades or whatever. Although now you can only bring 3 of those things. But so we're talking maybe like Primarch level models. I think is really difficult to get at right. Maybe it's impossible. I don't know. But you either make it like you're trying to make it good so people want to play it. But then if you make it too good, one model can dominate, right? But then if you don't make it slightly not that good, and you can't make them good at the expense of the rest of that army, then nobody plays it. Because then it's like, well, 500 points is not as good as a unit of Terminators. Then nobody plays it, right? So I don't know. I think it's really hard to balance a one big model kind of thing in this kind of game. I don't know what it is about AOS that it kind of just works a little bit better. Like I was playing 900 point Nagash, right? That's crazy. Would you ever play like a 40k model that's 900 points? Probably not, right? But like it just worked in AOS, but it seems like they can never just get it quite right for 40k, and I don't know why that is because I'm not smart enough to figure that out. But yeah, I would.
Well, for Mortarion specifically, I don't know if they've gotten it right. I haven't played with them yet. But looking at the book, and people are going to disagree, I don't know if he's an auto take, to be honest, as strong as he is. I don't know if Mono Death Guard without Mortarion are better than with Mortarion. But he is good. And one of the things that they did in this book that might make him something that's worth taking, but not, you know, overly powerful, whatever, is that he is faster than the rest of the army. So that's what he kind of brings on top of just having 500 points of Terminators, right? Because you have 500 points of Terminators, but they still have to walk over, whereas Mortarion moves 12. And he's got a bunch of auras. He's a major disruption piece, you know? So I think that's what he brings to the army. It's like that kind of that early game disruption. I would probably throw the half movement warlord trait on him so that he just gets into the opponent's face, slows down their whole army so that it brings the other army in line with how you move.
It was like the ultimate
level the
distraction
playing field.
carnifex.
Yeah. Whereas,
Not that
Yeah,
easy to get rid
exactly.
of.
yeah, exactly. So
from
that's what.
from my admittedly uninformed position, he feels like if he's not right, he's definitely close to right. Because Nick, you're not the only person who's told me he's good. I think you can include him, but I don't know if he's an auto take. And I think that's the way it should be. Death Guard should be viable with or without Mortarion. And again, from the limited sample we have, it seems like that may very well be the case. And if that's the case, then that means they got it right.
So, okay, last question on this before we move on. Do you think every army should have a big model centerpiece?
No,
Not necessarily.
There's some armies where it depends how they do it, I guess. For like our armies like Guard, I guess you could make I don't know, a relic Baneblade or something. I could imagine it, but it's not necessary. Some armies just feel and work well as just regular grunts, and of course Guard is my example again for that. And I think that's okay. And something like Harlequins or Craftworld Eldar or even Drukhari, it's fine if those guys don't have this massive centerpiece. I suppose you could do a massive Avatar of Cain.
Well, I mean, I don't know if you have to necessarily make it like scale wise, but they should have one kind of like ultimate commander. Like, who's getting this commander keyword, by the way? Like, so does every army should have one of these, or like, if they're so good at designing these now that they're neither good or bad, they're very playable, then maybe every army needs one.
Well, I mean, maybe, but then you give it to like Creed for Guard, I guess.
Centerpiece doesn't necessarily have to mean one model, right? You can have a centerpiece unit, right? It's really just something that draws, in my mind, centerpiece really just refers to the presentation of the army. So you're bringing that up to the table, you have it on your display, and it's something that draws the eye immediately, right?
So like the Triumph for Sisters, for example.
The Triumph for Sisters, or, a unit of Deathwing Knights that are well painted. They're the centerpiece unit of the army. Or, like it could be a number of things that qualify as centerpiece. I don't necessarily think every army has to have a Mortarion-sized model to qualify as centerpiece. You could have smaller HQ characters could be the centerpiece. You could have the Incarn for Ynnari is like a decent centerpiece, but that model isn't all that big.
Yeah, like that's what I'm talking about, right? Like I'm talking about centerpiece as in, like, as you said, like focus versus centerpiece as in size necessarily. I mean, it's cool to have size, but what are you gonna do? Make Creed like 10 times bigger? He gained weight, man. Yo, dude, you gained weight.
But he's already pretty fat.
But I mean, centerpiece, you're gonna see more I think you're gonna see more in armies that have lower number of units. So, like they'll have a more obvious focal point. If you have a super MSU army like Dark Eldar, it will be harder for the eye to track a centerpiece unless. I know you could always just paint, if you have a unit of Incubi and they go in one specific raider, you can paint that raider differently to represent that to be the centerpiece. But, as far as rules wise, no, I don't think every army has to have a centerpiece model. Like in the story, Death Guard have Mortarion, right? He's a Primarch. Other races aren't going to have that necessarily. And I think that's okay.
Okay, cool. All right, let's move on. We're going to talk about Dark Angels. First of all, I want to wax lyrical about Dark Angels for a minute. So the problem has always been that, at least as far as I've been playing Dark Angels, that first of all, Deathwing always sucked, and then there was never like a way of playing the wings together, which is clearly how they're supposed to function. The Ravenwing are supposed to scout the Fallen, and the Deathwing come in and take people out. That's kind of how the Dark Angels are designed, and then the green guys are just like scrubs. So it's like first and second company all the way, right? But there was never a reason to play Deathwing at all, and then you would never get this cool interaction of Ravenwing and Deathwing. And so they tried, and you had this combined assault thing previously, which is kind of like the Custodes Homer, Ravenwing guy, teleport Homer, Deathwing comes in. And that was cool, but then there wasn't really much to make the army playable other than this one stratagem. But now, really, it looks like, okay, Green Wing guys, you guys got the Marine book. You guys got all the shit in there.
Oh, I don't know. There's some interesting stuff
There
in Green Wing
is,
we can talk
but it's
about
like,
later.
okay, like, you guys got this because you guys 2 books now. This army has 2 books, so you guys get that, and this supplement was like heavy Raven Wing, and then like a little bit of Deathwing because some of the Deathwing stuff was in the Marine book too, but that flavor. But interestingly enough, they lost the combined assault. So
It's probably a good thing because with combined assault, this book would
yes,
be a
for
bit
sure,
much.
but they lost the one thing that really, really tried to give them that flavor back last time.
Well, what you're trying to say, I think, in a very roundabout way, is they finally got Dark Angel right because it's always been an army that's been split into three. It's really three armies into one, and that's really, really hard to get right with a rule set to make these armies feel like you could play them either as parts or as a whole. And I think they finally got it right with this book. That's what I'm most excited about, is because I'm a bit of a fluff bunny. I love that you can play a Deathwing army and it works and you've got the rules for it. You can play a Ravenwing army and it works and you've got the rules for it. You want to mix and match, it'll work too. Like this is really fantastic from that perspective where your army on the table will match something that makes sense in the
the
lore.
the coup de grace there was if you want to play both, you can take an Outrider and a Vanguard and not pay 6 CP for it. You'll
Well, you'll
pay
pay
three,
but yes, you'll get.
but you
You'll get
would have
half of
paid
it.
6,
Refund.
right? Like somebody
Yeah,
probably must have thought, well, why if you want to play both wings, yeah, you lose half your CP, right? Like that. That's great.
that's something I want to see for a lot of other armies out there. There's a lot of armies that in their thematic fluff have like I don't know BL Town for Craft World Eldar or I don't know. There's a bunch of armies where fluff wise it makes sense that they would have an army of just bikers or just elite terminators or wraith constructs or whatever because that's their shtick, right?
Mm.
But the rules never really incentivized to do that because you'd be putting yourself as at a disadvantage CP wise for doing it. But now they give you the option. You want to play pure Ravenwing? That means you don't have to pay a tax to bring a battalion and have your token Green Wing guys to just make it work. You want to play Ravenwing? There you go. There's a rule set
But
that makes that
luckily,
work.
and probably smartly, they didn't just say, okay, everybody in this detachment is now OBSEC. They make you
Yes.
pick out, which I thought was, I mean, sure, I'd love my Black Knights to be OBSEC and my Deathwing Knights too, but they didn't do that, right? So it's like, okay, you got to play some bikers though. You got to play some of these Outrider guys. You got to play normal Terminators if you want the OBSEC, right?
You can still do it with Warlord trades, but yes, it's
Yeah. So, okay, the other thing I really like about this book is Ravenwing wise, because I'm a Ravenwing big fan, is I love that the mobility they've brought back to the army. So they tried to encourage mobility before by changing Jink. It was like, okay, so you have to advance to get the 4-up. It was like, okay, well, that kind of sucks then because then I can't really do anything. And then it's like, so, okay, so now you got your 5-up, you got your 4-up. There's another way of getting your 4-up. Azrael Soul gives you 4-up if you happen to be there. They've got stratagems for extra move, a pregame move. They got your OPSEC bikers. They can fall back and shoot. They got rid of those campaign thing, whatever it was called. I can't remember. Vigilis. But now they've replaced it with the stratagem, basically. After you fight, you can fall back or move. So it's really, really fluffy, basically. Raven Wings just shooting all around the board, popping shots. Some of them are OBSEC. Like, I really like what they've done with the Raven Wing in this book.
everything you just said costs a lot
It
of
does.
CP though. So this is going to be one of those armies where there's a lot of power in the army. A lot of it is behind a fairly hefty CP wall, so you're going to have to be real careful at managing your CP. No, just frivolous re-rolling saves or damage
And
rolls
that's
there.
probably
with that
where some of
army.
the balance into this army comes from, right?
Yeah, because most of those good stratagems, they're all like
Yeah.
2 or 3 CP. They're
Yeah.
expensive.
Yeah, and you might be spending 3 CP for a second detachment, so
You probably will be if you want to be competitive
Yeah,
about it. I think the pure Ravenwing and the pure Deathwing are going to work fine. They're going to be good, but I think from what I've looked at the book so far, if you really want to compete, you'll want 2 detachments, if only for the extra HQ slots, because there's some really great HQs in
yeah.
here.
Again, disappointing we didn't get a new Azrael, new Azrael model.
Well, so see,
the
for
Lion.
me, because Azrael was one of the first models that I ever bought with my own money, in second edition in 1994. I look at that guy and I think he looks absolute like the pinnacle of marine perfection. But that's probably my rose-tinted nostalgia glasses speaking.
Yeah. And in fact, so like Ezekiel is also metal here. I think Asmodai is plastic. I can't remember.
No,
He's
he'd be
fine guess too.
I'm
So
pretty sure.
Samael, of course, is not plastic, and there's no
Fine gas.
Saberclaw anymore.
It's all
So
fine
like,
gas.
yeah, their characters are good, but they could use like a Mephiston treatment of one guy.
Okay, so hobby tip for the listeners out there. This is what I've been doing with my own Terminator models, because I know you're not a fan of the Terminator model, Darren, and I know why. It's because if you put them next to a Primaris Marine, they look like dwarfs, basically, because they're super wide but super short. So they
The
look very
scale is
stocky and
just a
kind
little
of
bit
long.
wrong.
Right. So what you do is you build a really tall slate base. So you give them that extra half inch of height. And then they're the exact same height as Primaris Marines. And because they're wide models, the Terminators, they actually look right. If you just build up the base a little bit with cork or slate or whatever.
There's Francois modeling for advantage again. All right. So Deathwing basically got good before the supplement, and then they've stayed. So some people thought that they might lose some of the rules, but they've kept the 4-up automatic transhuman on infantry, and now you have OBSEC Terminators, and so they lost the combined assault. Deathwing Knights still kick whatever ass they choose to kick, and these guys are going to be very difficult to shift.
Now they're still slow and they're still low model count. Like if you want to make a Deathwing army, it'll have like 35 models.
Yeah, welcome
It's
to
gonna be a small
Custodes
army.
life. Yeah.
Well, I mean, right now they're shaping to be like better custodians from what I
They
can
already
see.
are better custodians. They hit harder and they're harder to kill. It's the only two things we
Can
do.
you imagine what the Custodes Terminators are going to be like after seeing these Death Guard and Deathwing Knight Terminators? Like,
Yes, we can't imagine.
because you're going to have like 12
Scary.
models.
Literally imagining it all the time, Nick.
8 wound Terminators or
Darren
some
has
crap.
vivid dreams about what his Terminators are going to
Yeah.
be like.
Well,
Gonna change his underwear. in the
either they
morning.
got to be tougher or they got to lower the price. Our Terminators are twice as costly as these guys, and now not as tough or as hitty. So they got to do.
Yeah, it does make it does feel a little wrong that I don't know your Aquilone Terminators are costed the way they are when you put them side by side with
Well, look,
Blight Lords or Deathwing.
yeah, it's the same like having my Thousand Suns or my Grey Knights. Like they're sitting on the shelves of their new books because I can't play 1 wound Marines or pay the points I do for a rubric when there's a bunch of 2 wound, 3 wound Marines out there.
Yeah, yeah,
We're just back to the haves and have-nots of 9th edition.
Yeah.
The armies that have codexes are really good. The armies that don't, not so much. With notable exceptions, Harlequins are still tearing it up despite having no codex.
yeah. So I'm super looking forward to playing combined Ravenwing and for once playing some Deathwing. So I'm super looking forward to getting some of my old bikes on the table with new bases, but and then getting entirely new Deathwing wing to my army on the table. It's going to be super nostalgic for me, and I can use my rhinos as terrain.
What you should do is like saw them in half and just make yourself ruined rhino terrain.
Well, I already done that. Like my Castellan is standing on an old rhino.
That's true.
Three of my rhinos are now Sisters of Silence rhinos. So I
Yep.
still have 5 more.
That's what
No
you get. That's
tabletop
what you get
Titans.
for being the dirty kind of player that played
Yeah.
that Lion Blades Strike Force or whatever it was.
It wasn't even me making like dirty shit up. It was the rules right there in front of me. So it's like, yeah. Oh man, it took so long to paint those things too. Okay, so what's your favorite thing out of the whole book, Francois?
Well, my favorite thing is that it finally feels like a fluffy Dark Angel army. Now, if you mean the most powerful thing, the thing that I'm looking forward to putting on the table first, it's again nostalgia tinted glasses, but I'm looking forward to putting a big brick of 10 Terminators or Deathwing Knights on the table, giving an ancient the Pennant of Remembrance for -1 damage, and watching that 10-man block of Terminators just tank an entire army's worth of shooting. That's what I'm looking forward to most.
I'm looking forward to just playing this army again. When I go to tournaments, I'm still going to play Custodes, but like to play here on the stream or whatever, like. And although the vision of what my Terminators are going to look like versus the reality of what they will eventually look like is probably very different, I think
Are your painting skills and reality going to clash, you think?
exactly. I think it's gonna look way better than my Dark Angels army did in 7th, and it's gonna be cool. So yeah. Okay, very cool. Okay, so if you guys got questions in the chat, then let us know. There were no Discord questions. And so, in case people are wondering after the fact, we don't really do, well, since the Marine debacle, I guess, we don't really do full Codex reviews. If you want full Codex reviews, there's plenty of great channels out there that do full every page Codex reviews.
They do it earlier and better in weekends.
It's all
so
out
don't
now.
bother.
Like, we don't get the book early, so it's kind of no point like doing all that a week or 2 weeks sometimes after everybody else. But it's always good to talk about some of these new books, especially books that we play. So when Gene Stealer Cult comes out, we might need to get a guest on or something. I don't know.
Or just not talk about it.
Even Tyranids, we could talk about Tyranids because
I have a
Tyranid army.
We
We
can
can get Phil on talk Tyranids, and so yeah, that would be cool. All right, there was a question earlier in the chat. I'm trying to find it now about the LV Nopen. Did you guys catch any of the LV Nopen on the weekend?
Yeah, I watched most of it.
Oh yeah.
A couple of videos.
I watched most of it.
Yeah, so that was the kind of LVO substitute that Peter and Val and FLG guys ended up putting on in conjunction with a whole bunch of much more famous YouTubers than us. And I think how that worked, I couldn't catch any of it, but they each made a list, and then if the list won, somebody else would play it. Is that how it ended up working?
The list would move on to the next step and not the player. Because of COVID restrictions, of course, which made it really interesting because some really powerful lists that on paper you'd expect to win did not make it because they were complicated to play and required a specific skill set and experience. And so you hand that list over to someone who's never played it, and it's going to be a big challenge, which it was. So I had a lot of fun watching all the games, or I didn't actually watch all of them because that's not physically possible, but I watched a lot of those games, and I thought it was fascinating as post-second round to watch people struggle with playing a list they were not familiar with. That was really fascinating. You shouldn't watch those games trying to look for high-level competitive play, even though there was some of that, because a lot of people were simply unfamiliar with their lists. But for me, the highlight of the weekend was actually Brian from Tabletop Titans winning with Drukhari, a list that he had never played. He'd never played Drukhari before. He'd played against Drukhari a bunch of times, obviously, but it's not one of his armies. And he beat a really tooled-up Sisters list that Adrian was playing, despite having no experience with it. And I thought it was really neat and got to showcase how versatile a player he is. And that list ended up making the final and then losing to a mixed Sisters and Custodes list. That was a really strong list, obviously. And I really enjoyed the weekend. I hope they do it again.
Yeah, it's one of the games I watched, and it was a terrific game. They both showed such great sportsmanship, and I think they're both a little surprised by the outcome at the end of the game.
Pretty sure they both thought that the Sisters were going to win, yeah.
But it also does show Brian's skill. And
the cleverness of that list. That list was a clever list.
Yeah, was that JT McDowell's list?
That was JT's list.
Yeah, well designed. Basically, what is a lot considered the Drukhari a bottom book, he was able to build something that could compete, and not only compete in his hands, but that other people could take and compete with. So yeah, it was a very good game. And of course, Tabletop Titans, I mean, they are essentially the gold standard for streaming right now, in my opinion. Them and Play on Tabletop.
Yeah.
Well, play on. They do fantastic edited battle report. For the live stuff, I'd definitely give it to the Titans for sure.
Oh yeah, the live stuff, the Titans have it, but Play on still have that pretty good production value as well.
And their niche of the really short, cleverly edited 40-minute bat reps is really nice.
Yeah. So I thought it was super interesting, the whole premise of the way that the tournament was set up. And that you had all these channels contributing. Obviously, it was like a charity event. And so that's super cool. It's literally like a week after Hammer Out Cancer, and just trying to keep Warhammer alive, right, for people who can't play right now. And so that was cool. And a lot of the commentating was good too, on some of the games that didn't have, like, where people weren't commenting or whatever. And that Adam Camilleri gets everywhere. I don't know if that man ever sleeps,
He-
but
He's really
He-
good at it. Like
he's everywhere.
I'm so impressed by how he manages to live commentate a game that he's not anywhere near to, and make sense. That's a really good skill
And
set.
then I also liked it that you had some really good players in there playing stuff they haven't played or not familiar with. And so I'm sorry guys, like, I don't think you can draw, a lot of people trying to draw meta analyses from this tournament. I'm not really think this tournament was designed for that sort of thing. I mean, Nick, no, like, that final game was like, it's not your clear meta right now, but I think it was really cool. And so actually, that's an interesting. Obviously, they had to design their list to make sure that whoever was going to play the list in the future would have the models, and stuff is painted. So the lists were made in a little bit of a tighter kind of vacuum than normal.
And that's why the on paper strongest list, if you asked me which list was the strongest on paper, it would have been TJ Lanigan's Magnus and Morty list. Like, that's a scary list, but it needs a player to operate it well, someone who's got experience with it. It's a very tricksy list, and it's not a list you can just hand out to someone. That's the downfall of that list.
I mean, the same with like Harlequins. Like, Adrian's Harlequins list is
Well, thankfully they lost round one, so
yeah.
but you're right. Yeah. It's also a list you can't just hand out to someone.
Yeah. All right, cool. All right. Doesn't look like any other questions. So thanks very much, everybody, for tuning in. As usual, Francois, Nick, thank you for joining me for this chat. So that's it for this week. And
Thanks
I
for having
think next week, we might not do the cast next week. I'm on call next week, so it may not be a good week to plan too much activity, but we'll see. Probably plan like a little cheeky stream here or there. But we'll speak with Chris and see when he can break his busy schedule of Flames of War painting and come grace us with a episode 200 of the podcast, which actually I don't think is actually episode 200. It's way more than 200, but 200 with modern numbering, since modern records were kept. Since the shot clock was started.
Because all of us came onto it a few years after. Well, you came onto it before Nick and I, but it's been years.
Yeah,
since
so I had to think back at my own history, and then so I got that, and then but we'll hear more about and it's actually pretty interesting, kind of where it all started. So please join us.
Frankly,
please join us next time for that, and that's about it. So thanks very much, guys, for following and subscribing and liking and watching. Patrons, big shout out to the Discord, and we'll see everybody next time.